in the BTOM. The UK are taking a risk-based approach to the requirements for certification from the 31st of January. Goods will be categorised into high, medium and low risk. On gov.uk you will find some useful resources. You'll find risk categories linked to CN codes or commodities. And you will also find a very useful resource, how to complete a health certificate for export to Great Britain. There are a few points that I'd just like to highlight. Very, very important that your business is registered on traces, regardless of whether or not you are exporting high, medium or low risk. Your business must be registered on traces to export to GB. Make sure you have users validated on the traces system who are fully trained, and make sure you have adequate numbers. Make sure you have identified the risk categorization for your product. That's very important. And if medium or high, be familiar with the GB health certificate for your commodity. And also at this stage, it's absolutely crucial that you've had engagement with your local certifying team and that you've fine-tuned the process to make sure that you have all the processes that are required in place for export to GB on the 31st of January. So I will just go briefly through the agenda. Micheál Moran, Superintending Veterinary Inspector, will give a brief presentation on the requirements for the certification of products of animal origin to GB. Tony Devlin, Senior Superintending Veterinary Inspector, will give an outline of the certification process flow. Next, Micheál Cuddihy, Superintending Veterinary Inspector, will give a review of how to fill in the first part of the EHC on traces. Tom Kennedy, Superintending Veterinary Inspector, will give a review of the type of accompanying documents that may be required to apply for an EHC. And then we will have a panel discussion and a question and answer session. I would ask you to put all questions into the questions box rather than the chat box. That's really important so that we have a view of the questions once the webinar is over, in case there are any outstanding questions that we need to answer for you. And also we will run through the presentations in the first instance and we will leave questions until the end. So I think we'll start now with the first presentation from Micheál Moran, Superintending Veterinary Inspector, on the requirements for certification. Thank you, Micheál.
Okay, so apologies for that technical glitch. So the outline of what my presentation is on the requirements for GB certification. These are just the basic requirements for in order for our staff, who are mostly veterinary inspectors and technical staff, to certify products of animal origin on the meat side. So we're going to talk about UK import legislation. We're going to talk about the DEFRA certificates, and then we're going to give you both direct and transit and storage. And then I'm just going to talk about some updates since the last time we gave these presentations, because things have moved on a little bit since before Christmas when we gave the last presentations. So just to make sure that we're very clear about what we're talking about, when we talk about the UK, we're talking about the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But we are certifying to GB, not to the UK. So we're certifying to Great Britain, which is all of the UK except Northern Ireland, includes the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. And Northern Ireland is excluded by way of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was updated by the Windsor Agreement. And the movement of products from Ireland to Northern Ireland is the same as the movement of any products within the EU. It's a single market. So there's no sanitary or phytosanitary agreement with the UK following its exit from the EU. And the problem there then is that because there's no agreement, none of these certs are agreed. Both sides, the EU have put up its own certs and GB, or the UK, have put up their own certs. And this is all going to happen on the 31st of January. So all the DEFRA certificates, this is the Department of Agriculture or Environment in the UK, all their certificates are based on the pre-2021 EU import certificates. And essentially their import requirements are reciprocated. So they're basically the same import requirements as the EU imposes on third countries. So in other words, everything has to comply with EU regulations. Great Britain has retained and adapted some EU import legislation and applied it to its imports from member states. So Lorna mentioned the British Border Target Operating Model, or BTOM as some people call it, which is their manual for imports into Great Britain. It covers imports to Great Britain and transits through Great Britain, using Great Britain as a land bridge from we say Ireland to the EU. It categorizes products of animal origin according to risk. That's their risk as they see it. We can't do the risk assessment. They have it already done, and they have classified medium and high risk products of animal origin as requiring certification. So this is just a summary table of what requires certification. So for instance, liquid milk and raw dairy products are classified as medium risk and do require certification, whereas pasteurized dairy products in general do not require certification. Fresh meat and minced meat, medium risk, requires certification. Meat preparations, meat products, both medium risk, require certification. And they have decided that composite products do not require certification because they've classified them as low risk. So again, the EU import legislation is all based on EU legislation, which is a big help to us because we're generally very familiar with EU legislation. Therefore, compliance with EU regulations more or less satisfies the UK requirements for public health, for animal welfare, and for animal health. On the public health side, they, in their certificates, call the legislation GB regulations in their certificates. Now, we know because we've, when you read their guidance notes, they are referring to their retained versions of all the EU food safety legislation from Regulation 178/2002 up through the hygiene package 852, 853, micro criteria, and then the official controls regulations associated with all official controls and ante-mortem, post-mortem, etc. And also other regulations associated with TSEs, for instance, BSE Regulation 999/2001. But they include everything that's on the books as regards EU regulations. In relation to animal welfare, the legislation is called, or they call it, GB Animal Welfare Requirements, and they are referring to specifically to Regulation 1099/2009, which is the welfare at slaughter. They don't refer to any other animal welfare legislation in their guidance notes, but we're making the assumption that other EU regulations relating to welfare, like transport and on-farm, also apply. In relation to residues, they talk about GB regulations in their certificates, and we know that they are referring to the now surpassed Directive 96/23, which was the core regulation for residues monitoring. That has now been taken over by the official controls regulation and other subsidiary regulations. But they talk about a residue plan approved list for EU member states and for third countries. In general, all member states are automatically approved, and third countries that can export into the EU can also export into GB. From the animal health point of view, they again talk about GB requirements. And even though these are EU regulations very commonly used, or were very commonly used, they all have been surpassed now by the animal health law in the EU. So they talk about Regulation 206/2010 for ungulates. These are animals with hooves, cattle, sheep, pigs, wild game, etc. 798/2008 for poultry. 2000, a Commission decision this time, 2000/572 on meat preparations, and 207/777 for meat products. And then there's a couple of regulations that deal with composite products, but we're not going to deal with them because their composite products are considered low risk and will not require certification. Regulation 206/2010, this applies to all imports into GB from EU and third countries of fresh meat, beef, pork, lamb, equine, wild ruminants, minced meat of all those species as well, beef, pork, lamb, equine. And they have animal health attestations. These are what will appear in the certificates relating to diseases such as rinderpest, foot and mouth disease, classical swine fever, African swine fever, and swine vesicular disease. And it lists the EU and third countries and any restrictions associated with each. Luckily, for us, there are no restrictions. So there's Ireland. If you click on the link in the DEFRA web pages or wherever you go, you will find that Ireland is listed as one region, whole country, and all those species, bovine, ovine, porcine, equine, and the wild species can be exported from here without any restrictions. Occasionally, and sometime in the future, there may be an animal health issue that causes some certification restrictions. And they have that built into their system by the addition of these, what they call supplementary guarantees. And they're listed from A to L. And they have, for instance, there are supplementary guarantees in relation to tuberculosis, to swine fever, and other diseases. Even trichinella is there. So we're not, as we start off certifying to GB, we're not using any certs that involve a supplementary guarantee. Commission Regulation 798/2008 applies to poultry meat, but it does not include minced poultry meat. And it has animal health attestations relating to territories or compartments being free from highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, and Newcastle disease. So there's just two diseases that are of concern in this regulation. Unfortunately, they can, our status, especially in relation to HPAI, can change very quickly. There must be no vaccination for any of those diseases. And again, the annexes to that piece of legislation lists EU and third countries and any restrictions relating to each. And the good news is, by way of an update, is since the last time I gave this presentation, we made representations to GB in relation to the classification of Ireland. And Ireland was composed of 3 different regions initially, but now it's been brought back to one region, so that there are no geographic restrictions on Ireland in the legislation. Now, we knew there were physically no geographic restrictions, but the legislation didn't say that. So we have that corrected now since December, and now Ireland is listed as IE0. That means the whole country is permitted to export poultry products to GB without restriction. Now, so the Commission Decision 2000/527 applies to all imports into the EU and third countries, from the EU, I beg your pardon, of meat preparations. Now, all of this decision says is that fresh meat used in meat preparations and exported to GB must comply with the animal health requirements for the species, so for the ungulates or for poultry. So that's basically what it's saying. So if it says that a meat preparation complies with the Commission Decision 2000, it means that the meat, the raw meat that's in that preparation complies with the animal health requirements for export to GB. And then the Commission Decision 2007-777 applies to imports to GB from EU and third countries of meat products and treated stomachs, bladders, and intestines. And again, it says animal health attestations associated with country of origin and treatment, whether it's heat treatment or fermentation treatment. So, and this is to do with disease control and the transmission of disease from one country to another. It hasn't got anything to do with the way or the technology that's used to produce the products that you want to produce. But what they do require is you have to know the country of origin of the raw meat, and they give it the appropriate treatment. So they have a retained version of this regulation, and they have generated their own Annex 2 to include EU member states, because in that regulation there is no EU member states mentioned, but in their version there is. So they start with Austria and go right through, and they show the regional restrictions associated with different regions. So for instance, Austria there is AT0, AT1, AT2. So there are 2 regions there. Now, whether those regions are bang up to date or not is another story, because it's up to each member state to make sure that the regions as listed by GB are up to date, and we have done that. So meat products and treated stomachs and bladders and intestines destined for GB must come from an EU or third country approved to export to GB and have undergone a treatment appropriate to the species and country of origin. And I'll repeat that again because it's something that you have to remember. So this is verified by checks on, in case of imported products, copies of the import certificate and CHED. Products imported to the EU can be directly re-exported to GB or exported to GB after further processing into meat products or composite products. The treatment specified in the GB certificate must be one that applies to the species and country of origin. So this is these are the treatments that are referred to in Annex 1 of their retained regulation. And so, for instance, they go from A to F. And common treatments that we will mention in this presentation are treatment A, which is no specific treatment. That means it's the minimum treatment that's normally used to turn a product from fresh meat into a meat product. To change the cut surface from looking like it's raw to looking like it's processed, or cooked or cured. So the curing of bacon, or the cooking of meat without any direct intention to kill any transmissible diseases, as in, say avian influenza or whatever. If you use treatment A, you're free to treat it in whatever way it takes just to make it into a meat product. Treatment D, for instance, is a very specific treatment. It's required for products coming from certain countries. And it's a minimum temperature of 70 degrees or a cure that for a minimum of 9 months that will result in a water activity of no more than 0.93 and a pH of not more than 6. So that's a very, complicated treatment for, especially on the cure side. So again, I've mentioned what these two mean. Again, meat products manufactured here from raw meat imported must comply with the animal health requirements appropriate to the species and country of origin and the treatment. So for instance, if a food business operator imports raw chicken from Brazil, this poultry must undergo treatment D before it can be exported into the UK or into GB. So we show you how this is derived. If you find Brazil in the annex to the decision, and you find Brazil and you move across, and then you find poultry and you move down where the column and the row intersect. It says treatment D. That's the minimum treatment allowed, which is, if it's cooked, it's 70 degrees. Again, I've just mentioned that already. So the treatment relates to the country of origin. For meat originating in Ireland, enter treatment A, regardless of the actual treatment applied. Somebody asked me a question. If we're producing a product that's the raw meat derives from Ireland, and they're giving it a treatment where the temperature exceeds 70 degrees, do they put in treatment D in the cert? And the answer is no. You put in the minimum treatment for your country, not the actual treatment you gave it. So because otherwise, if you put in treatment D in there, you will attract a lot of attention to the certificate, because it will look like the product came from a country where treatment D was mandatory. So you make sure that you put in the minimum treatment on the cert for the country of origin. So in Ireland's case, it's treatment A. So there we are now listed as treatment A. Now we were, in the previous version of this presentation, we were listed as treatment A and treatment D for certain zones. But again, because we made representations to GB, we got ourselves cleared up, and we ended up on one line instead of 3 lines of this table. And it's treatment A across the board, as you can see. And again, it's a treatment A for all species. Just move on now to the DEFRA certificates. And things have moved on again, even since then, because the certificates were just PDF copies. Now they're all up on traces as well. So all certificates for products of animal origin are published on the DEFRA website. And these are the templates that they expect, where they contain the core information, and particularly the certification notes. So for instance, on this page here, if you click on the link, you will eventually get to products of animal origin, and then you can select bovine meat. And if you select bovine meat, and I'm just picking that as an example, then you can see the 2 certificates there that are relevant. The bottom one is the current certificate. For us, it's GBHC 300, fresh meat, bovine fresh meat or minced meat. So these are the certificates that we have currently generated VPNs for, because they're what we would regard as the most common export commodities. So it's beef and minced beef, sheep meat and minced sheep meat, pork and minced pork, poultry not minced, meat preps, meat products, casings, and wild game. And we can add, VPNs for other commodities as required. So all certificates have a direct version and a transit or storage version. And the transit and storage versions are shorter versions, neater versions, and they cover the animal health requirements only. And in general, now, and again, I'm not an expert on traces, but in general, you will only need 1 transit certificate per commodity per consignment, because you do not have to put individual destinations. You can just put the country of destination. But the commodity issue is problematic, because if you have chilled and frozen on the same container, etc., that causes problems with selecting certificates. And then all the fresh meats except poultry are covered by 1 transit and storage certificate. So beef, pork, lamb are all covered by the same transit certificate. Chilled and frozen, unfortunately, require separate certificates, both direct and transit. So again, this is the PDF version of the bovine certificate. This is the part 1. And then there's the part 2, which I've just selected a shot of the public health attestations, which are all basically EU compliance. They're the animal health attestations on the transit certificate. So from the point of view of updates, As I said previously, most of the GB certificates are on traces now. They're not perfect. There are glitches there, which if you're practicing using certificates, you will have found out. We also issued Trader Notice 1 2024 a few weeks ago, which details what is required for GB certification from a food business operator's point of view. And all food business operators will need a GB specific SOP if we're going to make progress with applying or offering a certification service. Even if a company is not generating part 1 of the traces certificate, so that means cold stores that are involved in the loading of product must have a GB specific SOP. So there's the Trader Notice 1 2024. Please make yourself, if you're involved in the production, storage or export of fresh meat, meat preparations, meat products, you need to be familiar with that Trader Notice. And the GB specific SOP just gave you some of the content of what we require. So you need to have in your SOP how the product presented for certification will be eligible for the market. So, you know, if it's coming out of an EU approved plant, it'll practically all be eligible. But you need to have verification of on-site production compliance, and that's done by your daily checks that you do every day. The presence of an EU ID mark for product received from other DAFM plants, local authority plants, or other EU member states. And if you're importing product from third countries, you will need import health certificate and CHED relevant for the relevant third country. How you're going to notify DAFM of certification requirements, and this has to be made to the DAFM VI in advance of certification. And then how any persons involved in the notification and generation of part 1 of the traces certificate will be registered with traces and trained in the completion of part 1 of the certificate. The names of such, and then this also applies to any agents or logistics companies that you use. When you use an agent or a logistics company, we regard that as a delegated function, which means you're delegating your responsibility to complete a traces search to somebody else. The names of such agents and logistics companies must be notified to the local DAFM team. Otherwise, we will have no idea where the emails are coming from that are notifying us. So we need to know who's going to be notifying us with your product. How completed part 1 will be notified again, as I mentioned. How background documents will be, as described in another part of the Trader Notice, will be collected and uploaded to traces or otherwise sent, because you don't have to upload them to traces. You can actually send them by other means like an email. And again, how DAFM risk-based inspection of loading will be facilitated. We need to be able to see at least some of the loading, because we can't just sign certs and not know exactly what's going on, whether the loads are properly loaded. So just remember, UK requirements are mainly based on EU regulations from pre-2021 for public health, animal welfare and animal health. The animal health requirements are the most complicated and require food business operators to consider where the animals or raw materials come from before they can be certified, and be sure that you select the correct certificate for the product you're exporting. And that's a story in itself. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll pass you back to Lorna.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Tony Devlin, as Lorna mentioned, just going to go through the process flow for the certification of products, and just to give you some idea of how we expect the process to unfold. One second now. So just to go through the notification procedure, the application, import documentation, DAFM checks, the validation of the export health certificate, and then the final step, which is the electronic seal, or the e-seal as it's known as. So we're talking about notification and certification windows, and what we're suggesting here is that a certification schedule should be submitted the week prior to the export health certificate requirement. That's not to be confused with the IPAS notification. This is just a notification to DAFM staff so that we know to expect applications for certificates, so that we can have staff available and allocate resources. So that's really, that can be quite flexible and arranged with locally, particularly plants that maybe aren't exporting product every day or maybe irregularly. We need to know and have some advance notification as to when the requirement is, so that we can allocate resources. We're expecting certification should in general take place within the core hours, between 9 and half 5, and that if that's not possible, then we'll have to make a case for out of hours certification. So we will have limited resources available after half 5 and possibly up to 10 o'clock. So there'll be no certification prior to half 7 in the morning or after 10 o'clock at night. And weekends will also only have a limited service on a Saturday morning. So really, the submission of a completed Part 1 traces with all the required supporting documentation 12 to 24 hours in advance of certification will reduce the need for out of hours certification. So if we have all the information in advance during the core hours, we can begin doing the work on those, on the information that we've got, and do the background checks, traceability checks, and so on. So then at the time of loading then a physical identity check, it reduces the workload for just that type of check that can be done, possibly outside the core. But that's something that has to be arranged locally and discussed locally, and hopefully you've had some conversations about that during the certification trials last week. So queries in relation to the traces system can be directed to traces@agriculture.gov.ie, and I know a lot of you have engaged with that unit in the last week or so, and that's good that people are getting involved and getting to understand what the issues are in relation to their own specific requirements. So you need to have access. They can discuss access and registration details with the unit there. You need to know the local authority unit that you're going to be that you're in, and subsequent presenter will go through that. Micheál Cuddihy will go through that in a little bit more detail. You need to know the correct certificate for the product that you're sending to GB. You need to know the CN code, and as just was mentioned briefly earlier, agents associated with your business as untraded must be connected and associated with your business, so to enable them to do the Part 1 if that's what you've decided. So it's a matter of logging on to traces and selecting the appropriate health certificate for the product to be exported, and that's based on the EU definition and commodity and the CN codes. You must complete the mandatory fields on Part 1 of the certificate and then submit that to the relevant local authority unit. So this is probably the screen that you're hopefully familiar with now. You'll go into, see in the top left there, documents. When you click on documents, then the window on the side will open up, and if you're looking for an EU export. So it's an EU export, an export from the EU to GB. You'll then go across to the new, you can see it highlighted in green, new EU export, and when you click on that, it'll open up the various options, and this is where you need to know the product you're exporting and possibly the CN code, so that you can highlight then the particular certificate that you wish to use for the product that you're sending. So a number of fields are mandatory, and these are you can see these are highlighted by a red asterisk on the Part 1. So these may be different for products that are being consigned direct to GB or for transit loads. And I know some of you have encountered some issues in relation to the transit certificates that are on the traces. Some of the fields that are supposed to be optional are being recorded as compulsory. We'll be addressing those with the commission team, and hopefully that'll be rectified in the next number of days. But it's just to highlight, anywhere there is a red asterisk, you will have to put in an entry otherwise you won't be able to submit the application. So after you've completed the mandatory fields, you may upload supporting documentation, and examples of supporting documentation are the CHED, the Common Health Entry Document, maybe a CMR, traceability documentation, or a third country export health certificate. These, as Michael said, these documents may also be emailed to the VI or SA or the DAFM technical team locally. There's limited space on traces for large documents. You can upload multiple documents, but there is a size issue in relation to how big the document can be, the capacity in the traces system. So again, that can be teased out locally what the best arrangement is. So this is a question that has come up in previous webinars about sealing, and that's box I-23, the seal number or the container number, not mandatory field. And the seal number may only be entered if the sealing takes place under official supervision, and that won't be the case. So it's only required if mandated by the export health certificate, and some high-risk animal byproduct loads may require it, but in general, the products that we're dealing with and discussing this morning won't require a seal for at least an official seal. So that field should be left blank. But just to alert you that sealing will be required for transit loads. So that'll be a commercial seal and should be recorded on the commercial document, not in the application I-23 box. So there must be a link between the consignment and the certificate, and generally this is a batch number. So batch numbers can be recorded on the CMR or associated documentation will fulfill the requirement. GB guidance note states that the batch numbers may also be recorded in box I-18, description of the commodity. If you're using the CMR should be referenced in box I-2, certificate reference number, and we'll go through that a little bit later in one of the subsequent presentations. So product bearing the EU ID mark or the oval mark will not require veterinary support certificates. It may have come from another member state or a local authority plant. That's not to say we don't need any information from the supplying plant, because we may need information in relation to slaughter dates or production dates. Product imported from a third country, and don't forget that GB is now a third country, will have a CHED and a veterinary export health certificate. So those documents may be required. So the inspectors may need to review that documentation, as I said, for slaughter or production dates to enable certification. If the final transport details aren't known, it's been GB have confirmed that groupage may be entered. So if we don't know the final registration or the trailer that's carrying the product across, groupage can be entered in that field for the means of transport. And just to mention that product originating in Northern Ireland does not require an export health certificate. So when you have the details entered, you should review the information entered, and the options are to save it as a draft for later. So you can prepare a lot of certificates and have them saved as drafts in advance, or you can submit it for certification. So that's those options will appear at the bottom of the screen on the traces system when you have the part one completed. When you submit for certification, if there's any fields, compulsory fields that haven't been completed, you will get an error message, and you'll have to go back and complete those fields on the certificate. Once it's submitted for certification, it's now available for review by inspectors. You can still make changes unless it begins to be dealt with by the DAFM inspectors, in which case it moves to in progress. So up to this point, up to the point that it's moved to in progress, if you realize you've made a mistake or there's any changes required, you can still do that. But once it's moved to in progress for the DAFM inspectors, then it's locked for editing from the FBO side. So we're suggesting that you should email the local veterinary team notifying that an application has been submitted, and the email should include the health certificate number or URL link to the certificate, the place of dispatch, supporting documentation, a list of supporting documentation and any documentation that you've been asked for, and the expected date and time of departure, so that we know just the deadline for having the certificate ready for you. So on our side, on the DAFM side, we can search using this URL link that will bring us straight into the application once we log in. We can search using the traces number, or we can search for certificates from a particular business by date range using the business name and address. The inspectors will have access to their local authority units and all the certificates that are in that they've been assigned local authority unit access to. Again, we'll go through that in a little more detail in the subsequent presentation. So the inspectors have to carry out the technical and regulatory checks. They have to review the application, looking at the support documentation and possibly traceability information, and there may be a need to carry out on-site verification checks. The VI is responsible for completing the attestations, and if necessary, physical and identity checks may be carried out by technical or veterinary teams on the ground as part of the verification process. So when all is satisfactory, the inspector will then sign the certificate electronically. It's an e-seal, and GB have confirmed that an electronic signed certificate is the preference from them, so we won't be producing hard copies. It's not required, and we won't be doing it. So this ends I suppose the process once the certificate has been signed on the system. So the applicant should then have access to the certificate, and you may set up an email notification system within Traces so that you will be alerted that when the certificate has been signed with the e-seal by the veterinary inspector, and this will enable you then to make the IPAFS notification. So that's just a quick overview of the process, and colleagues coming now will go into some more detail in some of those aspects and hopefully give you a little bit more background. So thank you for the moment.
Okay, thanks very much, Tony. I'm just going to continue talking about some more detail about the Traces cert part 1 in particular. So this is the part that I'm sure a lot of you are getting quite familiar with right now at the moment, since in the last couple of weeks, particularly in the last 2 weeks, I think we've had a lot of queries about this. So look, this is probably more relevant a few weeks ago. People are familiar now, but I'll go over it again. Traces NT, it's part of the European Commission's Information Management System for Official Controls, or IMSOC. It's a website where you can manage the imports and exports to and from the EU. And for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to talk about the EU export certificates. And these certificates apply to live animals and animal products, so foodstuffs. And just to give a bit of background, these are going on at the moment all the time. We've had over 10,000 of these certs done from Ireland this year, mainly in live animal, but I'm sure that'll change next year, or later this year, later this month, when we'll have many more for animal products and food products. So Michael talked in some detail about what products require checks, and we know it's risk-based, and we know that each product is either high, medium, or low risk, and we know that it's medium and high risk need these checks. And for the purposes of say the food, the type of products that you'll be exporting, they're mainly in the medium risk category. So more details on that can be found in the Border Target Operating Model document, which is published by DEFRA. So in preparation for the 31st of January, one of the key things we've been talking about all along is communication, which this is communication within your organizations, but also communication with the local DAFM team, which will be doing your certification, and with DAFM more centrally. So as I'm sure a lot of you have been in touch with the Traces team, who have been very busy answering questions in the last week. But if you haven't done so, I think most people have, but not everybody, but if you haven't done so, now is a good time to make contact with your local DAFM team who will be doing the certification. Both sides need to be exactly clear on what the ask is and what availability resources is for certification. Within your own organization, please be clear on who is responsible for the process of creating the certificate. So, for example, we know that some of the cold stores aren't doing the certificate. It's the companies which own the product in the cold store. So in that scenario, the people in the cold store need to know who to talk to in the company which owns the product. Or if you're one of the larger companies and you have several offices, make sure you know who to contact within that organization. Or if you're using an agent, a third party for doing this, make sure that you're familiar with that. Make sure that information is available to the DAFM team doing the certification. They'll need to know that if it's not you who they talk to about a certificate issue, they need to know who that should be and how they can contact them. Please ensure that there's someone available when you are when the cert needs to go. So you might submit the documentation 12 hours in advance or 24 hours in advance, and the load might be going at say 5 p.m. today. But if there's an issue, and if the person who does all the traces work is gone at 3 p.m. today, if something happens between 3 and 5 p.m. before the load goes, something happens that means that an update needs to be put on traces or so on, you need to make sure that can be done, otherwise it could delay the load. This is especially relevant where loads are going after hours. So the person doing the traces might work regular hours, but the load might go after hours. So just make sure you have a contingency plan in place there, that if there is an amendment needed or something changed on the cert, that it can be done, just so your cert doesn't get held up, or your product doesn't get held up. The GB authorities, when you start trading with them, you'll hear them talking about an operator responsible for the consignment. That's the legal person on the cert or on the UK shed who is responsible for it, and that's who they'll liaise with. So again, make sure that you're aware of that one person will be getting that communications, and they know who they need to. For example, if they're a customs agent and they don't deal with the food safety aspects, who they need to know who they pass those queries on to, or who they get that information from. Just a little bit more, added this slide in since the last webinar, and this is just maybe put us some of the feedback we've got from the trial week, which happened last week. So people need to be very clear the type of cert. So overall certification requirement, and that includes the type of certificate. Is it a transit cert or is it an export cert? They are different certs, and they have some different requirements. The number of certs you'll need, so just people are getting a better idea at this stage exactly what they need to be certified and how it's traveling and who's doing the certification and at what stage, so they'll have a better idea of the number of certs that are required, the time. And I think people are starting to see this at the moment when they start to drill down into the whole process of this. You need to allow sufficient time for yourselves to prepare the documentation, for the DAFM team to carry out their documentary checks and physical inspections. And also, Michael mentioned risk-based loading inspections. The DAFM team needs to be able to carry out loading inspections as required. So you might to review your internal processes to make sure this can take place. So, for example, up until now, you may have scanned everything onto invoices or so on as it was being put on the loading bay to go out. It might be necessary to carry that step out earlier on. So maybe going into chills to do that. You might know, for example, product from chill 1 is going on that truck tomorrow. We'll scan it when it goes in the truck. You might now need to go in earlier to chill 1 and scan that product, or take note of that product at an earlier stage. So just be mindful of that there are some challenges posed by this certification, but there are in a lot of cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases, there are things you can do to address that challenge before it gets to the certification stage. So maybe look at your processes with that in mind. Groupage. So groupage is where you might send a small consignment from your business, from your establishment, which will be later on consolidated with more consignments from another establishments and then sent on onwards in one load. So this is taking place in terms of groupage for transits. There are circumstances where your transit load can be sent forward from your establishment and be certified at a hub and put on a load of other goods. Please check with the company looking after your groupage to see whether this is a 10 p.m. So if you know, if your goods aren't arriving until quite late at night, they mightn't be eligible for that. So the bottom line here is check with the company doing the groupage. At the moment, all of the export direct to GB is certification from the point of dispatch. So that's from your businesses. There isn't a groupage certification model for those goods at this point. So the groupage certification really applies to transits only, but not in all cases. So check that with the company. That's the take-home message there. Just to one thing that Michael mentioned, that broadly speaking, in a transit, one commodity per transit load. Just be careful if you are splitting loads up and so on, and they're going to groupage and going to different trucks and things like that. Be mindful of their certification requirements. So if you're sending a truck with say 10 pallets, the pallets are being consolidated at a hub. You may need, the number of certs you need will depend on whether the certification has been at the hub or the number of, if it's not been at the hub, the number of trucks they're going on. So just be mindful of that, and you can query that with your local team or centrally here at DAFM if you have any questions about that. DAFM checks. So you'll be submitting part 1. The DAFM veterinary inspector or technical agricultural officer will be carrying out checks on part 1. You will need to provide the part 1 of the traces certificate, obviously, but also supporting documentation, which may include the details such as CMR, previous health certs, and so on. The individual certs are the new versions are up on traces now, and they'll have the compulsory fields which you'll need to fill as you're filling out the part 1 of the traces. Just a note on this, on some of the terminology used. So commodity codes, you'll be selecting your cert based on commodity code, but you may hear the terms CN code or HS codes used. For the purpose of this, they're pretty much interchangeable. They're not customs, they're not quite the same. They're based on the same number, and it goes down to 14 digits. And the number of digits you use, it depends on what the code is. But for the purposes of these certs, they're pretty much interchangeable. But for customs, there is a bit of a difference. But they're used to determine which certificate you're going to be using. And as far as I can see so far, it's just the first 4 digits that are being used. But that can go into further detail to 6 or 8 digits. But at the moment for GB, it appears to be the first 4 digits. The commodity code, you select that when you are selecting your certificate type in traces. You'll have a drop-down menu there, and you pick your applicable certificate. Just to note that some certificates might be common to more than one certificate code. So, for example, you could click on 100201, and there might be the same certificate might appear again in another commodity code as you click down. But keep it to the correct commodity code, because this will be checked on the cert So we can see the commodity code you've chosen for the cert, and it's written in plain English, and it's written in the code is also written on the cert. So we will be checking that. So just make sure you've picked the cert within the correct commodity code. As I said, sometimes the certs can reappear in different commodity codes. Certificate model, you'll have to pick the same model. So within a commodity code, you could have a transit cert, or you could have an export cert. So make sure you pick the correct one. And this is particularly important if you're doing both, that you don't accidentally pick the wrong one, because there is some different information and different certification requirements on them. So it's important that it's correct. Again, it's something we will be checking, that that you've put in the right model, but it is up to yourselves to select the correct. If you pick the wrong model and put the wrong information into it, that's something for yourselves to make sure you do right. So within the export cert, there's several boxes numbered I number 1 to I down to I number 28 on the first page. I28 is an important box. This contains most of the information that we'll be checking, which relates to the particular product on the load. So as you can see here, here's a screenshot from one of the certs, and you'll have to, we see that again, the commodity model, the commodity number, the certificate model, but also some more detail on the product itself. I'm just taking a screenshot here from a box I28, and as you can see, the mandatory fields have a red asterisk beside them, and you'll have to enter that information for the fields such as species, nature of commodity, treatment type. That's all drop-down menus. And a question that has come up before is, in terms of the slaughterhouse, cutting plant, or cold store, if you have a meat product, or a consignment of meat that, for example, originated in more than one slaughterhouse, you can actually put the two slaughterhouses on one line here, and I've done that here. I've done it on the top line. You can see there's two slaughterhouses selected. On the bottom line there, the next product, there's some minced meat here that came from two different cutting plants. Originated one slaughterhouse, went to two different cutting plants and two different cold stores. So you can do that within the products. Just a quick note, this is something that might cause a little bit of an error sometimes, is that the type of packages and the type of the unit for net weight, it does ask for that. So just make sure you select it. And you can also default it on the top left there. You can see you can select the default unit and the default package type, which might save you doing it for each if you have multiple lines, doing it for every line. But it's something that could flash up an error, which it might be apparent what the error is, but just bear that one in mind, so you can deal with it if it comes your way. The description requirements in the model certs. So the final model certs, or the actual model certs, have been recently published in Traces last week. Our understanding is there's some further modifications to take place. So for example, there is an update due on the 29th of January. So for example, in the transit certificate, the consignee and the place of destination shouldn't be compulsory. They are at the moment, but that our understanding is that's been addressed on the 29th of January. And there are some other modifications to take place. As I think, as Michael has spoken about earlier, the GB has published their versions of the certs on the PDF versions of the certs on their website. The link is in this slide. And what I've done there is I've taken a screenshot from their certificates that they published, their final certificates that they published, and I put them on the screen here. And just look at this, and when you are supplying information to us, you just need to make sure you have that information in your supporting documentation, because that's what's required on the certs. So we'll be required to verify that. Not all of that is showing up as compulsory in the Traces certs at the moment, but that may change with an update. But just for your own preparations, this is what the GB authorities have asked for. So it's good practice to have that information available to us in the supporting documentation. Supporting documentation, and Tom is going to go into more detail on this after me, but it will be required, for the certificate to verify some of the information on the cert. We will need, for example, to verify weights, product type, and so on, traceability. The slaughter dates is something that is important, that is on the certificates, and we do need slaughter dates. And the document, there are no seals referenced on the certificates or batch numbers, so we do need to be able to link the supporting documentation in some way with the export cert. And one of the ways we're proposing that to happen, and we're requesting you do this, is you put in the reference of your CMO or so on, that important documentation, you put that reference in the local reference box in the certificate in I2A, and that links that supporting documentation with that cert. Just incidentally, you might need to have ready for the VI for their verification other documentation besides, say, your routine commercial documentation. So if you're dealing with goods, so for example, chicken that was imported from Brazil or Thailand to go on and make product, you need to have the details of that import. So the shed P number that came in on and the health cert. The reason this is important is because sometimes some of the animal health or the public health attestations on it will be verified on that certificate, and the VI will need that to see that to verify that for your product. You may have a scenario where you've imported, for example, 20 tons of chicken from Brazil or Thailand, and you might have a copy of that health cert and the shed P, which is good. But you might be exporting product from that 20 tons over, several consignments over a period of time, like a month or two. You can resubmit that. You can use that health cert and shed P in that case as supporting documentation each time you submit an export certificate. It can be reused as long as the product there can be linked back to it. It's not it needs to be apparent that product that you're using came from that original batch that was imported from Brazil. And you can resubmit that cert each time that's applicable. If you're in a meat plant that kills animals that originate in Northern Ireland, the interest certs are relevant here. You'll need to have the information those necessary for the VI. It is responsibility of the applicant, so yourselves or your agent, to supply this documentation to DAFM. And you can send it in. You'll talk to your local teams and arrange a way, but just so you know, you can attach that information by emails, or you can attach it to part 1 of the shed. Just be mindful that there is a 2 megabyte limit per file, and that files only stay up on document for a limited number of time, I think 3 or 4 months. Once the documentary check is completed, you'll be told, and what will happen is the DAFM official will save that in progress. When it's at in progress status, you can no longer amend it. Prior to the check being completed, if there's a problem or an issue identified, you'll be contacted and you'll be asked to provide the clarification or the amendment that's required. If this happens after the cert has been put in progress, so if, for example, the doc check is done and then there's a difference with the physical load that's presented when we check it, and an amendment is needed or something needs to be changed, what will happen is the certificate will be rejected and sent back to you. The change will be done by yourselves. The DAFM officers won't be doing the changes that are required. But it is quite straightforward to do that. The rejected cert stays on the system. Search for it, you find it, and it's a matter of clicking options, a copy is new, and all the old information will be kept on the certificate for you. You can just update where you need to do it. So it's actually a very quick process. But the take-home point is that DAFM doesn't make the changes in the certs if there's one needed, it's yourselves. But it does speed things up if you have all the information correct at the time of submission. And there's just how you copy as new. There's an option to to copy as new when you select your certificate to open it, and that so you select actions, copy as new, and all your information is kept on that cert. Here's a copy of the PDF certificate. Well, it's the in progress copy, but that's what you'll have to upload on iPass. Tony mentioned the competent authority. So DAFM for the East Central is a competent authority, and that's the same in most cases. The Central Competent Authority for Foodstuffs will always be DAFM. The local authority unit, this depends on where you're situated, and DAFM has split the country into 16 local offices. So just make sure that you've contacted your local team, that they know that they're certifying for you and they know where you are. And this is especially relevant if you're in a town that's on a border like Birr, Roscrea, Port Arlington, places like that that could cross over different counties or different local authority units. Just make sure you're 100% clear on where it is, because the DAFM staff will see the certificates relevant to their local authority units. So if you're not in it, they won't see your cert. Also, make sure you select the correct operator. So I think box I11 is what determines the local authority on the certificate. So you need to make sure you select. I think that's the point of dispatch. I think this is particularly important if you work for a company that has several premises around the country. So when you go to put information in those boxes, you'll get a drop-down list. Make sure you select the correct one, because if you select the wrong one, say you have an office, you have a cold store in Cork and you have a cold store in Donegal. If you accidentally click the Donegal one, the people in Cork won't see the certificate and they'll be wondering where it is. And you know, so just be mindful of that and bear that in mind, especially if the people are looking for a cert and can't find it. Yeah, it's a place of dispatch there. You can see it's linked to the local competent authority. So make sure you have the right option for that selected. A few different things. You can edit some information in your account if you'd like to. You don't have to, but you can. You can set the time to GMT. It's defaulted to Brussels time, so just be aware of that. And you can change the notifications settings. You can, within your account page, there's a little icon on the home page. You can go to notification preferences and select the ones relevant to what you're doing. So more than likely in this case, it'll be EU export, and the options you can have are rejected and validated. So when a cert relevant to you is rejected or validated, you'll get an automatic notification. But it is still advisable to talk to your local DAFM team and make sure you have clear methods of communications about these, so everyone's on the same page as to how certificates like been submitted or validated or so on will be communicated. There is a user guide on traces. Go to documentation, select the relevant type of certificate, which is EU export, and within that you'll get information on how to fill in each box and what information is needed. There's also a search function on traces. This is very useful. You can search by the number, but you can also search by date range or types of products and so on, because some of you might be copying certificates as new to say re-inputting information again, and it can be useful to search for an old type of certificate which you knew had the relevant information. So you can practice searching different ways. To help, and I'm sure many of you know this now, is traces at agriculture.gov.ie. They've been working very hard the last week to provide a lot of support to businesses around and to DAFM staff too. So just to acknowledge that, and that is their contact details. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, you can put them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of the webinar.
You're just on mute, Tom?
Yeah, can you see the screen now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, afternoon at this stage, everybody. I just want to talk to you about the accompanying documents that we will require from the food business operators. basically to provide security of the certification. Sorry. Just in terms of the presentation outline, I just want to discuss some of the basic considerations and then to discuss the specifics of the fresh meat certificates, the meat preps, and the meat products, and then some of the more challenges that are provided where you have products of non-Irish or animals of non-Irish origin in your products, and then to proffer some conclusions. Some fundamentals. Tony has gone through the certification requirements that the DAFM would be advised, you know, a week in advance of what one certification requirements would be for the following week. The speed at which the required documentation can be obtained from your systems and uploaded onto traces will maximize the amount of time given to DAFM to perform the checks and certify, and have the cert returned back to you so you're good to go whenever. This will require a level of changes to the traceability and the other supplier information that you have been getting heretofore, so that we can actually be in a position to facilitate the certification of the product. Country of origin information is critical because that's what we need for certification of the animal health requirements, as in territory and residency requirements. Just some warnings. There's absolutely no substitute for the interaction and the communication that will go on between FBOs and their certifying officers in deciding what precise documents will be required and what needs to be uploaded onto the system, so that that certifying officer can be satisfied that they that are in a position to certify the product. What you're going to hear here is not prescriptive. It's more to outline the underlying principles and guidelines. Again, it's between the FBO and the VI to determine exactly what will be required. We would ask that the accompanying documents will be uploaded into box I-17 on the part 1 of the cert. If that can't happen, then we would ask you to include them in the attachment to the notifying email that part 1 has actually been completed and is now ready for checking and for certifying. There's no limit to the number of documents that you can upload. However, the maximum file size of each document is just 2 megabytes. You've heard that the certs are now on traces, but again, I just ask you to be aware that many of the fields that currently appear optional are actually what we understand from GB to be mandatory. So there is updating and modifications to what's available on traces at the moment. So as already outlined, part 1 of the cert is completed by the FBOs, and the link then is sent to the DAFM office. It might be worth considering creating a dedicated email for traces to the particular office. You know, there's a dedicated inbox, and things don't get lost amongst you know, the daily other emails that actually happen. In the body of the email, we'd ask you to include the first and last slaughter dates for fresh frozen meat that's direct and in transit, and for meat preparations that are in transit, and to give us the quantities and the weights. The technical officers will do the checks and move the cert from new to in progress, and notify the VI that this has actually taken place and the checks are completed. At that point, the VI validates and does the certification. Any discrepancies during the checks, the FBO will be notified to make the correction, and this will be done before the cert will be moved into in progress. And the FBO, you can view the cert at any particular time to establish the status. It's important that we actually link the traces cert to the commercial document. Certificates do not contain any product identifying information like batch codes. So this link the product to the certificate needs to be maintained. And we've asked the box I2A is used for this, where the local reference number is included. It's free text, so you're free to put in whatever you wish. So that can be a commercial reference, shipment reference, an invoice number. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as that the number that appears here is also the number that appears on the commercial document. So this is an example of a CMR. It's garbled, but if you look within the red box, you can see the numbers 417. That's just part of a commercial reference. And in this particular FBO, they put it under the sender's agent's reference. A second FBO has, again, if you look at the red box, uses what they call a shipment reference. So that basically we have two FBOs doing slightly different things. However, it doesn't really matter as long as the same reference appears on the commercial document and the trace is cert. And the reference is the starting point for traceability, and it informs our country of origin labeling, or sorry, our country of origin, slaughter dates, the slaughter cutting plants involved, and the quantities of product that are involved. So on slaughter dates, this is important for fresh meat, frozen meat, meat preps in transit. Slaughter dates are important for territory and residency requirements. And you can see on the second last sentence, you have an option of putting in the specific slaughter date or a range of slaughter dates. So the earliest and the latest one. I think most business operators will be choosing the latter to put in the date range. This is a report from one FBO. If you go back, cast your mind back to a few earlier slides, we had that CMR with the reference 417. And this is a number of pallets, but it's called a box number, but in actual, they were actually pallets. And you can see, if you go across to the third last column, you can see the slaughter dates are there. And in this instance, we have had two slaughter dates, 31st of October and the 1st of November. So this is the kind of report or something similar that we can be used to actually support the information that you're providing us in terms of slaughter dates. In terms of the gross and net weight of the consignment, this is another example of a document from an FBO. You can see, again, it's relating to invoice number, it's 417. And down at the bottom, they've given us the total weights and the gross weights. You can also see on the top right, it tells us that the country of origin is Ireland, so we can, glean from that the, that we can actually the attestation and the health status of the animals. In relation to the identification of the commodities in box I28, we need to know the approval number of the abattoir, and we need to know the approval numbers of the cutting plants involved. So if we go back again to order 417, you can see we have the same number of pallets. You can see it's all been deboned in the one slaughter plant, or the one cutting plant, 456, but it's derived from two slaughter plants. I think it's 9 boxes for our 9 pallets units from 456 and 7 units from 1, 2, 3. So we've 2 slaughter plants involved and we've 1 cutting plant. So that's how it would appear in box I28. We would include both the approval numbers of the abattoirs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. We have a single cutting plant, 4, 5, 6, and the attached cold store to the cutting plant, 4, 5, 6, the weights and the number of packages. Then on traces, you can see that you can actually upload, or sorry, include as many slaughter plants as you wish, and as many cutting plants. So you would, in this, when you would have abattoir 1, 2, 3 inserted, then you would press the plus button, and that would allow you to insert the details for abattoir 456. This is another type of traceability information that another FBO has produced, and it gives all the information that we require in one report. If you go, the second CMR had a shipment reference 467. This is 467, and you can see it has been slaughtered in Slaughterhouse 8 and Slaughterhouse 1. A single cutting plant 8. You can see it gives us our gross and net weights. It gives us the minimum kill date and the maximum kill date. So that gives us our data slaughters in terms of date range. In this instance, it's just a single day. And it also gives us the animal origin of the meat. So that allows us to make the attestations for our territory and residency requirements. Moving on to meat preparations, you just consider the two following situations. You have a pork sausage that's made from pork trim, pork fat, and these are both from a standalone cutting plant. And this is important because on your one step back principle of traceability, your cutting plant is your cutting plant, and you may not know what the supplying slaughter plant into that cutting plant is. So this information up to now you may not have been getting, but for the meat preps cert, you will now require to have the identity of the slaughter plant. Similarly, if you're making a chicken sausage with chicken thigh meat, chicken skin, and they're from a cutting plant that's attached to a slaughterhouse, you cannot assume that the slaughterhouse that's attached is the actual supplying slaughterhouse, because that cutting plant could be getting in poultry meat from other poultry slaughterhouses and cutting it. So on the meat preps in box I-28, the identification of the commodities, again, we're talking about, we have both species. We have pig and poultry, so Sus scrofa and Gallus gallus. The treatment type, GB have advised that they wish to have the data minimum durability put in here in the form of days, month, year. Here is the approval number of the abattoir. This information now must be furnished to you by your supplier. So in the instance where you're getting it from cutting plants that take in meat from other sources, this, you cannot assume, and they may not have been given it to you here before. Now they have to give you this information to complete, for you to complete part 1 of the search. In terms of the origin, again, this also needs to be obtained from your supplier. You may not have been getting this heretofore either, particularly if you're a cutting plant that may actually been taking in meat from, non-Irish meat and doing cutting it further and then supplying to you. So again, that needs to be supplied from your supplier. For meat the preps and transit, we also need to know the slaughter dates. So this is something you most likely have not been getting, but now you will have to get from your supplier. And if you're getting meat from a standalone cutting plant, they will have to get the slaughter dates from the supplying slaughterhouse. So so a new chain of supplying information will have to be created, and hopefully at this stage it's well on its way to creation. So you're going to have to amend the suite of commercial documents that have been supplied to you heretofore, and your suppliers were going to have to amend their suite of documentation that they have been giving you and what they have been receiving from their suppliers in turn. So that supplementary information, will come on your supplier's commercial documents. You as the FBO will have to amend your intake procedures to include that information, to follow through into your batch recipes, into your mincing records, into your packing records, and ultimately onto your CMR. Meat products, again, if you think of your chicken and ham luncheon meat, again, we have the pork trim and pork fat from a cutting plant attached to a slaughterhouse. The same principle and same discussion that we've had earlier on applies. but also you have a bacon trim from a standalone meat product plant. In that instance, the standalone meat product plant or a curing plant, is now a further step down from the cutting plant and a further step down again from the slaughterhouse. Again, and you have chicken thigh meat included, and that's coming from the cutting plant that's attached to a slaughterhouse. And what I've said already also applies here, that you cannot make assumption that the meat has been slaughtered in the particular slaughterhouse. So when you're filling out box 28, if it's a multi-species meat product, you do have the option of actually selecting a number of species. So in this instance, we have the Sus scrofa from the pig and Gallus gallus, the poultry meat. It's a meat product. It's coming from two approved slaughterhouses, 777 and 123. And then the manufacturing plant is yourselves, and you may have sent that on to another approved cold store. So the information, has to be supplied by your supplier for you actually to complete this information downstream. In addition, for meat products, the origin of the meat and the minimum treatment that's required for the product, the minimum treatment for Ireland to make the meat into a meat product has to be included. And if there's, imported meat, for example, Brazilian chicken, then the minimum treatment for Brazilian chicken, in this instance, treatment D, also has to be included in the certificate. So again, we will need the origin of the meat, and if the origin of the meat is other than Ireland, we will need, and imported from a third country, we will need the import certs. But I'll discuss that in a few later slides. So exactly the same point is to be made for the meat products as the meat preparation, meat preps. The suite of documentation from your supplier is going to have to be amended. The suite of documentation from your suppliers will probably have to be amended so that the information that we require filters the whole way downstream to yourselves, and then the same information will have to filter right through your own in-process traceability systems. So the supplementary information from your supplier comes in with your supplier commercial documents, becomes part of your intake records, again into your batch recipes, your curing records, cooking records, slicing records, and ultimately onto the CMR, and the reference in the CMR then included in the traces, so we can link everything up together. In relation to those plants that slaughter animals of non-Irish origin, the origin, as I've previously said, is important for animal health attestations in terms of the residency of the animals and the territory requirements from an animal health point of view. So when you're if you're importing animals for slaughter, we need to know what the dates that the animals have been introduced onto the territory of Ireland. So again, we need full traceability information. So we're back to our original trader reference, shipment reference, whichever. Linking that then to the product batch numbers. So that goes back into a boning hall intake, carcass numbers, classification sheets, tag numbers, and then the import animal health certificate, which will then detail the date of import. Again, this is the territory requirements, so have been obtained in the territories. So we need to put in which code, and then the particular animal health parameters that actually correspond to the particular territory at the time. Where you're using product of non-Irish origin as part of your product, and we'll take the imported chicken from Brazil. Just to note that it may be imported as raw or as imported raw or as a meat product. To trade as a meat product with GB, chicken from Brazil must undergo treatment D prior to its importation, or if it's imported raw during the production process in Ireland at an Irish FBO, it must undergo a treatment D prior to its exportation to GB. Now, in this instance, if you bring it in raw and transforming it into a meat product, your treatment D may be satisfied by your cooking process and your CCP. This is an example of a Brazilian animal health certificate. If you just note the location of the red box, and this is the top box here is the red box magnified. You can see it again, it's chicken. It's a meat product. You can see it has undergone treatment D, and it is from slaughterhouse 3300. So the information on that certificate then allows us to complete box I-28, where we just transfer the information of the slaughterhouse and the meat product and the species. And then on the part 2 of the cert, we can actually transfer the information in relation to the species being Gallus gallus, originating from Brazil, and that the Brazilian authorities have certified the product into the EU as having undergone treatment D. So in conclusion, and I would hope at this stage that this process is well underway, that the VI and the FBOs, you familiarise yourselves with the certificates that are applicable to your product and to the particular market, is whether it's a transit or it's a final destination. But both parties would work in collaboration in unison to parse and analyse the content of each cert to establish what exactly will be required to guarantee the security of the certification process. At that point, you may have to review and amend your current suites of information and documentation that you get from your suppliers. The findings of all of that should be incorporated into your Brexit SOP. The responsibility of supplying all this information rests with the food business operator. Incoming health certificates are critically important. Sheds and SHED-Ps do not always have the required information, and then practice to ensure, you know, that we've got it as near as perfect as we possibly can come the 31st of January. And thank you for your time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks very much. So I might invite all the panel members just to maybe rejoin. And we can go through the questions, and there's a number of questions have arisen. So just give it a moment. So the first question there is, and I'll just go through them as they've appeared, no particular order, as they say. So it's in relation to wooden pallets and the sanitary standard. Are plastic or blue wooden pallets to be used, or can any wooden pallet be used for products entering GB from Ireland? I'm not sure if we have anybody just on the call who's able to respond to that. I don't know, Damien, did that come up in any of our previous webinars that you may have an answer for? If not, we can get back to people.
Yeah, Tony, hi, afternoon everyone. Yeah, it did come up, so they have to be ISP 15 standard pallets, as I understand it, but maybe we'll take that question away and we'll issue a response on that just to confirm that with colleagues on the plant health side. But it's ISPM 15, so they do have to meet that standard wooden pallets. Great,
thanks for that, Damien. So there's a question here about is there a VPN being drawn up for animal byproduct category 3 to GB? I suppose that's for guidance for our own DAFM inspectors. I understand that is the case, but we'll confirm that and get that information out to staff. So the next one then is, can you please confirm that a separate certificate is required for fresh and frozen for both direct GB and transit consignments? Maybe Michael, you might respond to that one.
Yeah, the fresh and frozen or chilled and frozen options on the certificate are literally, they're what we call radial buttons. So they're mutually exclusive. In other words, you can't you can't select both of them. You can only select one. If you select the other one, the one you've selected becomes unselected. So you can only select either chilled or frozen. And there's another one there called controlled temperature, which I'm not 100% sure what that one means.
Thanks for that, Michael. So just a query about the slides from the presentation. Will they be forwarded? Yes, it is routine that we'll distribute them to stakeholders that were invited in due course. So we'll try and get those out as quickly as possible. But just to note, the presentations from the previous webinars, which aren't significantly different from early December, are available. So the next question is in relation to frozen beef tongue cert, and the number is given there 02062100, and frozen beef livers 02062200 are two separate certs. Does this mean they have to have two separate CMRs and invoices if going to the same customer? So Micheál, I'd imagine that we probably need the documentation for each of the certificate to be complete. So we probably do need two CMRs in that case and two certificates. Is that correct?
I
I'll let Tom come in. Tom?
No, I would two separate certs, yes, but I would see the same. I mean, the same CMR and the same invoices. The same if it's a single CMR, single invoice, it could be attached to both certs. You know, one line item being the tongues, one line item being the livers. But obviously, then we have, you know, if the other supporting information in terms of slaughter plants are different, you know, for the tongues and the livers, which unlikely they would be, but if they are, they will have to be, you know, differentiated as well. But no, the one CMR would do.
Okay, thanks for that, Tom. So the next one there is on traces. When selecting 1601 as the commodity, there's no option to select meat preparations GBHC 350 version 1.1. Is there any indication when this option will be available? I think the certificates are starting to appear in recent days on the system, but that specific one, Julia, have any specific information? If not, I suppose we just have to wait. But Julia, maybe you have any concrete information on that particular cert? Thanks.
No, at the moment, we haven't gotten any specific information about publication of the remaining model health certificates that have not been activated yet under the commodity codes. I understand that we were advised it's going to be from the 17th, so this is probably ongoing, and there is an update to the system scheduled for the 29th of January, so certainly there's going to be quite some changes made in between those times, but I am preparing a document to send up to our commission, to the commission staff, to advise them of the issues that have been brought to our attention by way of either concern, issue or modification, and this has been included in that request. So certainly I'll stress the importance of having that available, and we'll circulate it to colleagues once we receive a response on this matter.
Thanks very much, Julia. Next one, I think, is in relation possibly for Tom. Slaughter dates. Company A makes a meat preparation meat product from raw material from a slaughter plant B, both Republic of Ireland FBOs. What would you think would be the appropriate methodology or records to be provided to demonstrate the slaughter dates? The exporting company won't necessarily have this information, or you may have covered that in the webinar, because I think that question came in advance. But maybe if you have anything to just add there, Tom.
I suppose, like the direct answer to the question, the information has to go from one company to the next. You know, so if company A is making the meat preparation, so it needs to get the slaughter dates of the supplying raw material from slaughter plant B. So you know, so there's X boxes of whatever cut meat going from cutting plant B to company A of these particular slaughter dates. And I suppose if there's another consignment coming the next day and both consignments are being made into whatever the preparation is on the third day, it's a matter of amalgamating your slaughter dates from the first consignment and the second consignment, and you have, as I say, the minimum slaughter date and the maximum slaughter date, and that'll be your date range.
Thanks, Tom. So the next one I think is in relation to the commodities per consignment and what can be covered by a single cert. So the slides quote that the FBOs may only need one transit certificate per commodity per consignment. But then the next point that all fresh meats except poultry are covered by one transit cert. So I think we covered that, Michael, but maybe you might just go through it a little bit again, if you don't mind, just in relation to particularly the transit certs, I think, which is the point here.
Yeah, and the point of the comment was that it's not one transit cert per destination, okay, or per customer. So in other words, if you're supplying 20 customers in France, you can use one consignment certificate, well, sorry, one transit certificate for one commodity. Okay, so if it's meat preparation, you can use one consignment, except there are things that will multiply that up. If there's chilled and frozen, it will multiply it up. But if you have, for instance, pig meat, beef, and lamb on the same container, you can put all of them, if they're all, we'll say, chilled or all frozen, you can put them on one transit certificate. So there are combinations, but the numbers are considerably reduced in comparison to what you would need if you were sending one certificate to each customer. And the transit certificate for fresh meat, that's for beef, pork, and lamb, is the same certificate. So those three meat types can be combined. But chilled and frozen are separate automatically because you can't certify the two on the same certificate. So I understand there's confusion, but the point being is that the numbers of certificates are reduced in comparison to direct certification.
Thanks, Michael. I think that's something can be teased out locally when you're engaging with the local staff to see what certs are required and how many. So the next query is in relation to, can FBOs let trucks leave before they have confirmation of the e-seal being completed? Well, I mean, if they leave before the e-seal is completed, they haven't got the cert, so we'd see that as a high risk and wouldn't advise that. Next query is in relation to the groupage point. I think, Micheál, your audio might have dropped slightly, but I think it was Michael might have covered it just now. Basically, that the product covered by one cert can't be split into different vehicles. I suppose that was one of the points you were making. I don't know if you want to add anything more, Micheál.
Yeah. No, I will. Yeah. It has come up as a query where it was the point I was making about the groupage hubs, that not all products that goes to a groupage hub will be certified there. There's very different reasons why it might not be suitable for that to happen. So if it's certified at the point of origin for transits, so for example, if you have a truck with 5 different destinations and it's going to be consolidated in a consolidation hub, you might need 5 separate certs. Say it's one commodity type, it's meat. You have to bear in mind that the truck leaves your premises, it's now split into 5 different trucks and it goes onwards to France. You'll need a cert for each of those trucks. So be mindful of that, unless the certification is taking place at the consolidation hub, which in many cases it will, but not in all. And the important thing here is to contact the transporter, the groupage company doing your groupage, to be clear on what will apply to your certificates. Will they be certified by the linear model, which is from your dispatch from your establishment, or will they be certified at the groupage hub? So that's hopefully that's that kind of explained again.
Thanks, Micheál. The specific one here in relation to the certificate for boneless minced meat, it's not available on traces. Are there more certs still going up? And that is the case. We've confirmed that. So the next one in relation to cold store approval number for the finished product once the meat from plants have been processed, or is it the cold store of the plants where the meat was stored until production? So, Michael, I wonder if you can clarify that. So there may be a number of cold stores involved in the production process, and which should be recorded, or both. Thanks.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the one I would put in is the one at the very end, the loading cold store.
Yeah.
That's the most important cold store from the point of view of traces.
Thanks, Michael. The correct EHC number for lamb carcasses, I don't know that off the top of my head. I wonder, Micheál or Michael?
Yeah, there, I've already entered that. It's the same as all ovine meat. It's 320, GBHC 320.
Thanks for that. So, yeah, okay. So the trace allows you to select a number of commodity codes 0201, 0202, and 0206 on the same cert. Should these be separate applications? I'm not clear now. Is it different products or?
Tony,
you can, yeah. Sorry.
go ahead,
you
Micheál.
can put the three. Yeah, you can go ahead and open up a cert, say for 0201, and then in box I-28 you can actually add different commodity codes as well at that point. However, Michael's point earlier on about the certification requirements, that they might not be applicable to the different codes. So on part 2, when you're certifying fresh and frozen, you can't do both. So although it can be done, it might not be appropriate to do so in that case.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So query here, the Annex 2 of the Trader Notice, point 8, there's a reference to transmission to iPaths. On the DEFRA UK government site, it states you do not need to notify imports from the Republic of Ireland. So I understand that that's probably until the 31st of January. Lorna, are you aware of that? I think that has come up before, or Damien, maybe. I see you nodding there, maybe just to confirm what the situation is in that case.
Yeah, so the current UK guidance is representing the current position, where there isn't a requirement for a pre-notification of Irish imports, but that will be changing on the 31st of January. So where pre-notification for Irish goods will kick in. So the information on the current guidance on the UK website is the current situation, but obviously that will change from the 31st of January. They will be updating that guidance. We have been in contact with them just to confirm that, but that's the situation. So just to clarify, pre-notification will commence for Irish goods from the 31st of January.
Thanks, Damien. Okay, so would 2 different certs be needed? One for one load, which contains both frozen beef and frozen pork. So that might depend on whether it's a transit load or a load to 2GB. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, exactly. If it's transit load and they're both frozen, they could go on the same certificate. If it's a direct certification load, they have to go on to the species certificates, which are 2, at least 2. Well, it's more than that because it could be more than one consignee.
With regards to the fresh bovine meat and/or preparation certs, the VPN states that the section about -18 can be deleted as the GB authorities accept chilled meat products and preps. Can this now be done via traces, or do we need hard copy certs? Maybe Julia, I think that we understand that from the traces team, in the Commission traces team, that will be provided for. That's the accept chilled meat preparations. Are you aware of that?
Not specifically. I'm not too familiar with the question, but definitely I will follow up on that. Certainly on that particular question. I wouldn't have the answer myself right now, but I'll make sure they're aware of it and come back with a response.
Okay, I'll just clarify what currently the certificate attestation on traces or in the PDF says that both meat preparations and the mince meat of all the species is frozen to -18 before it is dispatched. The GB are saying we don't need to do that, but they're not going to change the certificate because the cert is also a third country cert, i.e. it's used for outside Europe. But they said that member states, the EU, can cross that out or strike it out. But we don't know whether that's because otherwise we wouldn't be certifying a true statement if the meat is not frozen. So how that's going to be, the mechanism of that on traces, whereby we're allowed to either strike it out manually. We don't want to have to print these certs to strike it out. We should be able to do it on traces if possible. So
Thank you for that clarification. No, that's very helpful, and thank you. Yes, the strike-through facility is available on traces for certain certificates. Now, whether it's going to be applicable for this one, I will follow up with the Commission on that, because I do know that they allow that for certificates and have applied that to certificates. So I'll just make sure that is noted for that one as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Julia. So on the transit certificates, can you select a different country than the UK for country of destination and place of destination? Yeah, so that has been flagged as an issue with the Commission. So it should be possible just to put the country of destination, the ISO code of country of destination, such as FR. I understand, I think at the moment that it's GB and is coming up there, the UK territory. So there is an issue there that we're aware of and following up on. Okay, so what if consignment from one FBO is going to several different drops in the UK, owned by one buyer? Will one certificate do? I suppose the point is here is where's the consignment being offloaded? If it's going to a hub where it's been offloaded and distributed to other drops, then the one certificate would do. But if it's a number of different destinations, then there would be a number of certificates required. Is that your understanding, Lorna?
Yeah, no, that's my understanding. If it's going to being consigned to one hub and distributed from that hub, then it's one cert. If it's going to multiple hubs, then it's multiple certs.
Okay, so point here, we were instructed to use cert GBHC 127E, but we were told on Friday that any certs with a letter at the end will be obsolete. Which cert number, I suppose, should we use then for sliced cured bacon? I suppose there is a specific cert for that. I don't know off the top of my head. The E used to refer to the European certs, whereas an X was for the third country certs that GB produced. But Julie, I don't know if you were able to provide any further advice on that specific question.
So this is in relation to the specific certificate model. I wouldn't have the answer for that, but certainly we could. Yeah.
It's GBHC 352 is the meat products certificate since August.
Okay, thanks for that, Michael.
That's what bacon comes under.
Okay, let's clarify that for that. So if transit loads need to be sealed, who's responsible for supplying seals and sealing the load? So that's a commercial seal. So the businesses will be responsible for looking after their own sealing, getting seals and applying the seals to the load. As I say, those are recorded on the commercial document, not on the IPAPS notification, or sorry, not on the traces part 1 notification. So just to make that distinction. We've trading companies with multiple addresses in the UK, or CMR would contain the trading company's name and the final destination address, which is different from the trading company's official address. How do we put in the consignee for these? Should I have a trading company's address, the final destination? So that's a specific question there in relation to the consignee. So the consignee, I suppose, will be the owner of the product in the UK, but the destination will be where the product actually goes. I think that's probably something we should take up more locally with your local team. Unless, or Lorna, do you want to add anything there just in relation to that?
No, I think that's best addressed locally, Tony. We need to tease through the detail of that a bit more. You're on mute there, Tony.
Sorry, apologies. So for transit cert, multiple customers in one container. Do we need to create a shed for each customer? I think the one, well, that's the French shed is the query there. I wonder, is it, or is it the shed for going into GB? Lorna, would you have any opinion on that query?
No, I'd have to take that question away. I'm not sure, Tony. So we'll take that away and we'll answer that later.
Fine, thanks, Lorna. So low risk products pre-notification only from the 31st of January 24. That's correct, I think. A similar question was asked earlier in relation to frozen product, minced products loading out of 2 cold stores. What cold store should go on the cert if part of the load has not been stored in the final place of loading? Michael, have you an opinion on that? Again, maybe there's the option to record the 2 cold stores on the certificate.
Yeah, just repeat the question again, Tony, because I can't see it here.
Okay, so it's in relation to frozen minced products loading out of 2 cold stores. What cold store is on the certificate if part of the load has not been stored in the final place of loading? So I think it's coming out of 2 cold stores, but hasn't been the second cold store. The product has not been stored in the second cold store.
Okay, it depends. If one of the cold stores is just a kind of a it passed through there, is this a groupage situation where product was picked up from one cold store and brought to another for final certification? It depends. Yeah. If it's loaded onto a container in one cold store and then moves to another and more stuff is put on, then the 2 cold stores are relevant. You know, it depends on. I haven't seen that question, so I.
Okay, so maybe something you would
take it away. Yeah.
Take it away, and if you engage, maybe engage locally, just to maybe go through the actual process that's involved there, be better able to respond.
If it's a groupage situation, if it's a consolidation, it may not require the intermediate cold store. But if it's picked up, put on a final container, and there's some in a linear model, then each of them, the loading points would need a certificate, and then that intermediate cold store would be recorded on one of those certificates. So it just depends on how it's managed.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And just there's another question there, not related to the cold storage, but can you please confirm that frozen beef tongues and frozen beef hearts cannot be certified on one traces certificate?
That's a CN code issue. I don't know whether where that arose.
Yeah, so it may require 2 certificates at the moment. That's what we're thinking.
You can't add all the different CN codes to the same certificate. Micheál may know the answer to that better than I would, but if you can't add CN codes for different types of offal to the same beef certificate, then that's possible that they can't be certified on one cert. In theory, they should be able to be, otherwise it would be incredibly inconvenient.
Yeah, I think you can. I haven't looked at all the certs, but you can add CN codes different CN codes onto one certificate, and provided the attestations and so on are all the same, you could certify them together. But, maybe we'd have to look at the two certs and have a go with it. But it could be possible, but can't confirm it right now. We'll have to take that one away, I think, and just double check.
Okay, thanks, Micheál. Another one here, just for fresh bovine export health certificate. Does the animal health territory refer to the origin of the meat or of the animal?
My understanding is it's the origin of the meat, not the origin of the animal for fresh meat. But again, it's because I've just checked the regulation, which is the 206/2010, and it appears to me to be the origin of the meat.
Okay, thanks, Micheál. So there's another question here. It's quite specific. We might follow up just with the individual involved directly. There's a lot of pieces to it, so rather than try and tease it out on the webinar, we'll come back on that one. I don't see any further questions at the moment, so we might. If I've missed anything specific. What I might do now is bring the webinar to a close, but just to advise people to engage locally. It's impossible to cover every single scenario that may arise, but that can be done with the local teams. And if there are queries that arise that need further guidance, then if they come up from the local teams, we'll engage them with our traces team or the commission or EB as required. But I think the best thing is to continue to practice and engage with the system and with the local team, and then we'll have a better understanding of where any problems that may exist. It's a new process for us all, both on our side and on the food business operator side, so there will be some teething problems, no doubt, and it'll take a while for us all to get used and familiar with it. But I think working together, we should be able to overcome much of the problems. And the UK will be giving us some feedback in relation to the issues that they identify in relation to products that are crossing over the next number of months, and we'll feed that back to you as we get it. So if there's nothing else, I'll bring the webinar to a close. And thanks to all the participants and all the panelists. And apologies if I didn't put forward the questions as clearly as I should have, but hopefully everybody will have got something out of it. And as I say, they will be put up for viewing, that you can refer back to them in due course. Thanks very much, everybody.
Bye for now.